Hello again, Kevin Culp from Supermicro again. We're back at it again, performing some network provisioning on a Arista and Sonic switch. So today's demo will focus on presentation of VLANs on uplink ports that two switches are connected. It's a very simple network of an access VLAN that we will present, VLAN 650. The previous video we discussed lifecycle management of Supermicro's SuperCloud Composer switch integration. So today's video we're going to focus on really presenting VLANs to two uplink ports that are interconnected through an Arista switch and Sonic switch. So let's jump into it. First thing we're going to do is log into the SuperCloud Composer appliance or the web UI. So we're logging in as global admin again. And once we log in here, we're going to navigate to the switch module on the left hand side. So we'll click on the network option. And the first thing we're going to do is click on the Sonic switch itself, which is the 3748 switch. And let's just determine if these switches are truly interconnected together. We can easily perform that. These two switches really been unboxed. They have the native VLAN passing across their uplink ports on both the Ethernet 1 interfaces. So the first thing we'll do is let's see if the uplink ports are interconnected. So we can simply click on the LLDP neighbor information. We see here that the Ethernet 0 interface, that's designated as the Ethernet 1 interface or port 1 of the Sonic switch, the 3748, is indeed connected because we're exposing information, harvesting LLDP information, indicating that this Arista switch is pulling the systemoid or the SNMP based information through LLDP as well. And we're seeing here system name is the DCMS 750. So all this information is basically extracted through the link layer discovery protocol that typically is on many Ethernet switches out there in the industry. So we see that the Arista is being discovered across that uplink port from the Sonic switch. So let's go over to the Arista switch, and we would expect to see information being pulled from the Arista switch itself. So we should see the Sonic switch showing up here. So let's click on the Arista switch, go to your detailed information and LLDP neighbor, and lo and behold, if we connect into the Ethernet interface there, we see the Sonic switch information being pulled and the port ID that in which it's being pulled. So we truly do have interconnection between the two switches. So that's a good thing. We're learning this information through VLAN 1, which is the native VLAN. So let's start over on the Sonic switch first. And let's go ahead and provision a simple VLAN, which is VLAN 650. So we'll click on the Sonic switch, go to the physical port information of the Sonic switch itself, and let's determine if there's any VLANs that are associated with that port in which the two switches are interconnected. And we should see VLAN 1, access port VLAN 1 or access VLAN 1 as being exposed. So let's just double check and make sure that is the case itself. We do see a color code here coming or emerging, which is basically purple. And lo and behold, we do see the port status is operational, access VLAN number 1, and the administrative status is up. So let's go ahead and create a simple VLAN. And then we'll present that VLAN to that port. So right now we're going to create VLAN 650. So once this continues rendering here, we'll go ahead and add a VLAN of 650. And let's add 650. And in this case, let's not add a VLAN name. Let's just take the default operation and see what happens. So we've created the VLAN. So that has been pushed out to our Sonic switch. And so once the screen renders back, we should have seen a push operation to VLAN 650 and provisioned, or at least created, on that Sonic switch. So we see success here of the push operation through the API, and lo and behold, the 650 VLAN emerges, and it's part of our VLAN list now in our web UI. And notice it's defaulted to VLAN 650. So now that we've created the VLAN, the next particular step is to associate that VLAN to a specific port. So we're going to configure that as an access VLAN 650 on the port of the Sonic switch. So we'll go into the physical port web UI or screen, and once it continues to render or complete render, then we can go in and associate VLAN 650 to that particular port itself. So let's click on Ethernet 0, come over to the section on VLAN settings, and what we'll do here is we'll plug in VLAN 650, and once we plug in 650, it shows up in the list. Notice, because again we created the VLAN. So we can then, and it defaults to VLAN 650, we submit here and pushes the operation out to the switch to configure that port for VLAN 650. If you were to connect into the CLI of the switch, you probably need to perform at least 4 or 5 CLI-based commands in order to configure that port for VLAN 650. It becomes extremely important to save time to be able to provision multiple VLANs to a particular switch. So you can imagine if I was, provisioning VLAN 650 to say 50 ports on a particular switch, and you make the multiplication of 4 times 50, that would be really 200 commands that you would need to execute on that switch to perform VLAN provisioning. So that becomes a time saver when you can use the GUI here instead of having to go in and get connected into the CLI to perform those command operations. So we'll wait till this completes here, and it is now 650 VLAN that has been presented to that uplink port itself. So we're access VLAN 650, and at this point the next step is to go over to the Arista switch and also present VLAN 650 on that interface. So we will have to configure the VLAN list for the Arista for 650. And so then we can go ahead and click the VLAN list and create our VLAN 650. And for consistency purposes, let's call it VLAN 650 because that's what we call the other side. So you want to be consistent between your description. If you can create any name that you want, I'm just simply using this as the default operation here. And once we create that VLAN, we now have 650 created associated with the Arista switch. So being able to provision or communicate with the API on the Arista seems to be a lot more snappier than actually going ahead and sending an API call into the Sonic. So you probably saw that. So we're working on improvements and optimization to be able to speed up that so it doesn't take long for the screen to render. So after the VLAN 650 is created on the Arista switch, the next step is to associate that VLAN to its uplink port. So we have the two that are interconnected. So we're now going to configure that port for 650. Notice it belongs into access VLAN 1. So the other side is now configured as 650 as the VLAN. So we would expect no MAC address table learning associated with each of those interfaces. So we're going to go ahead and add in VLAN 650. So again, it shows up in the list. It defaults to VLAN 650. We're going to submit it. And at that point, it makes a push out to the API call to configure it. And bingo, we have access VLAN 650 now associated with that Arista switch. So at this point, let's see if now the MAC address table has learned the MAC address of the corresponding switch. So we can come up to the MAC address table here and select VLAN 650 and then issue a reload, and we should get basically a address being learned in the MAC address table. Let's give it a couple of more seconds here to learn. Why don't we go ahead and connect over to the Sonic switch and see if it's learned the MAC address itself. We can actually come over to LLDP and let's see if our neighbor has been learned on Ethernet 1. So we are seeing the MAC address, chassis address learned. If we weren't in the same VLAN, this information would not be available to us. So at this point, we should be seeing 5461 appearing in our VLAN configuration. Let's go ahead and see here on the other side of the switch if we're learning that information. So let's go to networking here and choose the option for Sonic and click on physical. Oops, I'm sorry, MAC address. We want MAC address table, so we'll wait till it actually renders and we can see here if we see VLAN 650 showing up in the list. So we see a little bit of delay and being able to pull information from the Sonic-based switch, the 3748. We have not experienced this kind of delay in the 400G switch. It seems to be a lot more responsive to our queries here in gathering information. So let's see if the MAC address on the 3748 shows up here with the 650 VLAN and the MAC address. Let's see if we're able to pull the MAC address information from the CAM table or MAC address table of the switch itself. So our demo lab here has quite a few individuals coming in to assess and evaluate SuperCloud Composer. So we have a customer demo lab. We've stood up. We've chosen to use this demo lab as a way to do these YouTube videos itself. You'll notice here now that we have received the MAC address has been learned across that interface. So we then can typically add additional servers that need to be provisioned in VLAN 650, assign them IP addresses, and from there we would have a network built between compute hosts to communicate in VLAN 650. So this video is complete. We've done simple VLAN presentation on a port. Next series of videos will focus on link aggregation groups or lags for grouping ports together based on performance and redundancy for what we call LACP. We'll touch into also the networking provisioning agent as well in the next series of videos. So let's go ahead and do one more thing before I let you go, is connect into the physical piece of this, and let's reset the environment back to an access VLAN. So we have a reset option that you can clear the port, which is really kind of a nifty feature to allow you to go ahead and maybe quickly clear out or purge out a VLAN from a particular access port or trunk port and reset it back to the default native VLAN, which is VLAN 1. So we'll give it a couple of minutes here to render. We'll come back to Ethernet 0 again. Come over to what we call the VLAN settings itself. And you see this option here which says reset to default. We'll go ahead and choose that option to basically clear that VLAN from the port and set it back to just VLAN 1. So we'll click on that option, submit it, push the API call to the switch, let it execute, and reset the port back to VLAN 1, which is the native VLAN. So we'll wait a couple of minutes here before the system completes rendering here, and we should see this access port move back into access VLAN 1 itself. We see it working here with this cloud type icon here, indicating that we're rendering basically the screen, and we've got our response back from the back end, a push to the web UI, and indeed that access VLAN has now changed back to 1. So let's go back on the Arista side and go change that back as well. So we did it on the Sonic switch. Let's go back over to the Arista switch and do the same thing over there. Bring up our physical port screen, and let's change the port itself back to VLAN 1. Coming to the VLAN settings options and setting back the checkbox to reset to default, submitting it, and then the push happens basically, and we should then see the web UI immediately respond back and set back to access VLAN 1. So this is the end of the video. We've successfully were able to scale out a simple VLAN between two interconnect switches. Thank you for joining. That's all today. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.